I don't know if you all can hear me, but I can't hear you.
Make the speaker. All right, Kevin, now can you hear us?
Yeah, that came through clearly. Thanks.
Sorry about the delay. Oh, come on, mouse, really? I have to do Casella. Okay, great. I apologize for the short delay in the beginning of today's 2 o'clock Budget Advisory Board meeting. We're experiencing some technical difficulties that won't happen for subsequent meetings. Oh, that's, I'm just trying to see if we can get the mouse online. Okay, well, just gonna move forward. I'm gonna pull up the agenda real quick so we can have a good reference. Let me open that up for you. Probably under screen point, would that be wise? We should just go ahead and do that. Where did it go? There you go. All right. Got the agenda up. It's 2:10 p.m. So I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order, if I may, of the Grand County Budget Advisory Board meeting. Today is September 7th, 2023. Present here today are board members Shaylee Bryant, Treasurer Chris Kaufman, Renee Baker, myself, Clerk Auditor Gabriel Wojtek, and also we will explain the rest of the attendance in a little bit here. We also have Judge Danley Welch O'Donnell, County Commissioner Mike McCurdy, and Associate Commission Administrator Quinn Hall. Also present is Chief Deputy Clerk Auditor Dana Van Horn, who's taking minutes, and Commission Administrator Mallory Nassau is present as well. So we'll go ahead and move on to the items that are listed in our agenda today. The first item we have is the election of chair, vice chair, and secretary, which is something that we do at the first Budget Advisory Board meeting of every year. Is there anyone that'd like to make a motion to that, to any of those effects?
I'd like to nominate Gabriel Wojtek as chair.
I'll second it. Am I a voting member?
Not technically yet.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion by Kaufman to elect Wojtek as chair, second by board member Bryant. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
I
I
Right.
don't know.
Sorry, Mike. Well, we got 4, so we're good. That motion passes by a vote of 4-0.
Kevin voted too.
Kevin voted, yeah, so that was 1, 2, 3. Can I vote for myself? I guess I didn't.
Yeah.
All right, that motion passes. I'm not going to vote for myself. I'll just abstain because it'll pass anyway. That's a motion passes 4-0 with Wojtek abstaining. The next action item we have on the agenda is the approval of minutes from October 28th, 2022. Did anyone have a chance to review the minutes? If so, I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Thanks, Dana. We'll go back to that. We have a motion on the table to approve minutes to October 28th, 2022. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Second by Baker. All those in favor of passing, of approving those minutes, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. We'll go back to item 1. We forgot to elect a vice chair and a secretary. Just as some background, Treasurer Kaufman has served as the secretary in the past, though hasn't necessarily taken the traditional minute-taking duties of a secretary. And we will have Chief Deputy Dana Van Horn available to take minutes for these meetings. So that's just a little background. We might consider keeping that orientation. And as far as vice chair goes, maybe I would suggest, since this is the second year of Shaylee's 2-year term, maybe this would be a great way to go out with some fireworks.
Oh, boy.
But I'll leave it up to someone else.
Was that a nomination?
I'll make a motion. I nominate Shayla Bryant as vice chair and Chris Kaufman as secretary.
Have a second?
I second.
All right, motion by Baker to nominate Bryant as vice chair, Kaufman as secretary, second by Bryant. All those voting in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you all. All right, so we'll move right along to our department presentations. I'm gonna open up Cassell here.
Hey, Gabe, before you get started, I just want to let you know I'm in a different time zone and I'm recovering from COVID. So I'm gonna sign off in 45 minutes or an hour, something like that. So just so you're not surprised.
Thanks for letting
Feel
us.
better.
Thanks for letting us know, and yes, indeed, feel better. All right, so the first department presentation on our agenda is the Justice Court, and that's the judges here to help us present that budget. Just opening up. Kevin, is Cassell displayed here on the screen share?
Not yet.
Okay. So I guess I got to select that window here, likely is what I'm looking at doing. I have that open. How do I do that?
Pop up now, I think.
I can't minimize that. What do I do here? Let's see. I'm just going to do it that way. All right. Working out the kinks here. Thanks, everyone. All right, so the Grand County Justice Court, which is housed here in the Grand County Courthouse. And we're going to go first, we're going to look at the expenses that are being requested for 2024 by Judge Welch O'Donnell. On a side note, and one thing that we'll cover, I think, a little bit more in depth or give an update on is that Personnel Services Director Renee Baker is in the process of populating the fields of salary, overtime, and benefits as needed for each department. But at least for today, those fields are going to be left unpopulated. So that's not something that we're going to be discussing at today's Budget Advisory Board meeting. And maybe we'll get an update from Baker about when we can start to expect those numbers in.
Yeah.
But we'll move right ahead here to, let's see, is this not updated, Judge? Huh. Okay, we'll move right up here to the subscriptions and memberships line for expenses. And we'll go ahead and put things in as needed. What do we have for subscriptions and memberships?
So on the overtime, we were just going to carry over. So we don't have something in that. I'm noticing as you say that. I was going to request that the same amount be carried over in the amount of $2,700.
Okay.
And we're kind of close to that this year. I anticipate we'll probably use all of that this year. Subscription and benefits, currently we have $300 for 2023, and we're requesting the same amount for 2024. So subscription, if you want me to give information about that, what it might entail, I can do that. But we're requesting 300, which is what we had last year as well.
Yep, so that's, what we will consider throughout these presentations as sort of baseline operational expenses from department to department. 300 was the approved amount in 2023, and which is being carried over to 2024. That seems satisfactory. Let's see, we've got the travel line here. Right now it's set at 3,000. Is that what we discussed, Judge, or?
That's what I have.
Great. And so in that line, do you want to talk a little bit about the conferences that you and your staff have to go to? Thank you.
Last year we had $2,000 budgeted, and we're a little bit over this year, but we now have a fuel line, so that might help accommodate for it in the future. But what we use that for is actually most of our mandatory trainings I have 3 clerks. They each have an annual clerks conference that they all have to attend. Now it's primarily in person now. And then they also have to do some job shadowing where each of them have to spend an entire day with another clerk in another jurisdiction. So that includes that travel line. I have 2 annual mandatory judicial conferences that I attend. So one of them is paid for by the state in its entirety, and the other has some county expenses. And then, let's see, there's also a few other mandatory trainings that people have to go to. I don't know that this year I actually don't have any additional trainings that we necessarily would be going to this year that are out of the mandatories. We'll see if something pops up, but I don't have anything like that planned. And then the other things that would be included in the travel are generally I have to travel up to Matheson Courthouse a few times a year for a few in-person meetings and other jurisdictions for various related type of issues on a number of boards. So that's sometimes covered by the state, sometimes not.
Great, thanks for that summary. Let's see, we had discussed equipment, supplies, and maintenance, and that would be linked to a new copy machine. Is that what do we want to enter in there as far as a service contract with a new copy machine provider? Was there something?
So the equipment, supplies, and maintenance, I estimate that it'll probably be, I think I put $1,600 in mine. So sorry that some of yours aren't.
I don't know why. Yeah, I'm not sure. Is yours updated? Or yeah, I guess. Yeah. Sorry, it's all right.
I apologize. Actually, 1,800.
Okay.
So yeah, that was updated, and that's what we had spoke about. That's just with our estimated maintenance contract for the copy machine. We currently have a copier, and this will actually, I anticipate this being a reduced amount from our annual maintenance contract or quarterly maintenance contract.
And for the public, this is going to be a recurring item that we see across many departments, equipment, supplies, and maintenance. And oftentimes, for many departments, it refers to this Les Olson contract, which is a service provider, as well as there's a cost per piece that's printed, whether it's black and white or color. And so that all gets compiled and billed on a quarterly basis. And right now, as we'll see as we go through this department presentation, this department actually is proposing not to use Les Olson anymore and use a different service. But 1,800 is I'm just gonna put that in there, new copy machine service contract. And this is, and that's based, that 1,800 that's being requested is based directly on a bid that's provided by that company, correct?
By our best estimate per click bid, but the per click bid is lower than the Les Olson company per click bid.
Great, thank you. And then let's see, 400. So we're going to add in, we're proposing to add in a fuel line for 2024 for the Justice
Yeah.
Court.
And I estimated that, and again, that's another one of those that we spoke about, but it's not reflecting in there. Or that I emailed you after we did some of the calculations, and I just did a location. I figured in the miles, divided by an estimated mile per gallon times $4 per gallon, and come up with the number of places that we have to go, trips, separate trips and vehicle, and I estimate that at 1,400. Don't know what that actually will be, because that will be hugely varying.
And I appreciate you making those calculations, and just for the sake of the board and the public, I asked department heads to do their best to create estimates based on their, actual expected travel and what they can reasonably estimate to expend on any given line, rather than something that could be considered a really loose ballpark. I try to ask every department head to sort of say, oh, how many trips are you taking? Where are you going? What type of vehicle are you going to be driving? And what's the cost of fuel? And so as the judge just summarized for us, that's how she came to that number.
Right.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. I'll give you a quick breakdown. That's like 3 trips to St. George, 3 trips to Provo, a trip to Park City, 5 trips to Price, and 3 to Salt Lake. So
Right, wonderful. So it's specific. Thank you. Interpretation services, did we last leave that? Did we bump that a little bit?
we left that, so that's under professional services, and we left that at 3,000. It seems like that's kind of been a good number this year. It doesn't look like we're gonna use all of that, but that's kind of just a varying number that we have no way of predicting. But
yeah, and the
so
service that's
paying
obviously
for interpreters. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, obviously vital for the court's functioning. And I know subpoenas, that did get bumped up a little bit.
Right. So in the miscellaneous item, we raised that previously. It had been at 400, and we bumped it up to 600. I think it looks like this year we used a little bit out of that, and then I remember a year in the past there had been a little bit, very minimal amounts used. But to give you an explanation of what that line is that is where we would pay people when they come to court if they are subpoenaed and they return their subpoena and say they want their $18.50. That's the line that we pay them out of. If we have a jury trial, we summon jurors, we pay them a daily rate, and so that would come out of that as well. And then also if we have a jury trial, we would also need to feed the jurors for every meal that we require them to stay at the courthouse. So we figured in what lunch may cost, and if we go into deliberation in the evening, what dinner may cost, waters, jury fees, and then also witness fees. And so I think that if we have one jury trial, we could probably eat up that $600. But we haven't had one for a while, so that's a what if, just in case, file money to have that in there.
Great, thank you. And then copy machine quotes. Sorry that this hasn't been updated in there.
Sure.
Was sure that I had, but I'm sure you have that. It looks like you have a direct quote from a.
It's $4,909.92.
And what's the current state of the copy machine in your office?
We believe it's about 7 years old. We haven't done much digging into it, but everybody that's worked there, and I think that kind of matches up for some of the other copiers within the county. We think it's about 7 years old. We use it on a regular basis. So anytime people are getting citations, we have a full packet that we copy that goes out to them. So every person that gets a speeding ticket in Moab gets about 4 copies that come from our copiers. So we have a lot of copies that go out on a regular basis. It's just old, needs replaced, needs to run faster, needs to not have the lines, and will actually be, besides being more efficient, will actually be less cost per clicks, which I don't completely understand, but I have a good idea of it. Less cost per clicks for the maintenance on it as well as than what we're currently paying.
Okay, great. Thank you. And now I know I'm not losing my mind because I know these last two lines in your budget. I remember this morning we were working together and I put new numbers in there and now they're not there. So I know, I'm like, did I actually forget? And I know I didn't now, but that's okay. Neither here nor there. And so that 4,900 was in the capital equipment line for the Justice Court budget.
Right.
I think that's an interesting one, and it might be something I should follow up on. I think we typically look at capital equipment as purchases over $5,000. This one actually comes right under. So I'm not sure it actually matters, but it might. So I think I'm just going to make a note. It won't affect the overall bottom line, but I'm just going to make a note. CA
Inventory.
CA to look into moving into inventory. Would you support that, Renee?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a few years ago when we were doing fixed assets that we just recoded under inventory. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see, where did we leave off in the inventory line? I know you've got some new staff, and there's some things that you will have to purchase, or there might be a computer. What do you have on that account?
We have $1,400 on that line. We have a computer that isn't due to be replaced, but it is having some issues, and Matt with IT suggested we have a contingency plan, and then we have an employee that plans to retire next year. And I don't anticipate needing new equipment for that new employee, but.
So in this particular case, in discussing this with the judge, I allowed an exception of a little bit of a buffer in there for office equipment that because of this staff turnover that she's expecting in 2024. So I allowed an extra 200 in that, in addition to the 1,200 that was referenced for a new computer by recommendation of Matt Sinaceros, the IT director. And so just to remind everyone and the board and the public, inventory is typically, for most departments, we're going to put those recommended scheduled replacements of computers and laptops across departments, but also things like desks and some of those other sort of hard inventory items. Hard, I don't know if that's the right word. I knew what I meant, but I'm not sure if I actually. Schooling expense.
We actually, it looks like maybe that's another one that's not showing anything anymore. So it's one that we talked about and left the same at that we put at $2,000. And I think that's probably an accurate reflection of what that would be. And schooling expenses would be considered fees to the number of mandatory trainings that I mentioned.
So registrations, entry fees, typically they have to feed people and hire speakers for these events. And so on that schooling expense line, which most departments have, that's where we place that expense. But travel, per diem, and lodging, lodging and per diem and others, other expenses associated with those conferences usually go up in the travel line, and we'll see that again and again. Do any members of the board have any questions regarding these 2024 expense requests?
We just skipped over cell phone allowance, and there's not an amount in there.
Thank you.
I do think that we could carry over the amount from 23 unless you would want to propose moving Emily's up. But the 1,560 would be for yours and for Emily's.
I don't know that Emily is. So that might be worth checking.
Yeah.
So I also had a question about the cell phone allowance line, and it might more be a question for Renee. That seems like kind of an old-fashioned thing to me back in the days when cell phones are really expensive and optional, but these days everybody has one regardless of whether or not they're working for Grand County. So have we checked into what other counties and municipalities are doing for this?
I've seen some few things, and I was going to probably get some numbers together and maybe propose a change to the structure. We have like 3 tiers of our cell phone allowance where supervisors can get up to 90 a month. We have a few employees who have county provided cell phones, and that payment is a $40 per month payment. And that's kind of like our lowest tier of a cell phone allowance. So I'd love to propose something and do a little bit more research on that, but I think I agree, Kevin, that we can look for some maybe changes there. At least, like, even in our tiers, it calls out, like, if you have to use data, and now everybody has a data plan, and we're not paying for like even text messages and things like that. So yeah, I think it's time to update it, but I don't have a concrete answer on what to do quite yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I just, on that aspect, my cell phone is where I do my job all the time. I have after hours calls, emails, probable cause statements where I have to release people from jail. Like, that is my means for doing it, and I have to be available 24/7. If I'm not available, I have to have somebody else be available. So that's a cell phone. While it seems like an odd thing, it's actually absolutely necessary for my job.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I also get a cell phone allowance as a county commissioner, and yeah, it just seems kind of silly. It's just basically, you know, $100 a pay period added to my paycheck. So I agree there is you're probably an example of someone where the cell phone is really necessary for the job, but I think for a lot of us, it seems a little odd that it's just added.
Quick question on that. Is there any way as a county to get instead of doing an allowance, to get like a cell phone plan?
We do get
That'd be cost effective.
discounts for being a county employee.
We do.
Verizon does give us discounts.
And we do have a county cell phone plan. There's just some, in the past, I think there used to be a lot more county provided phones, and we kind of did away with it. And now we're seeing a kind of need for that. So we can look into that, and I can provide some options at a later meeting for sure.
Do you feel like it's enough of the allowance that you get, like, to cover the majority of your cell phone bill?
Well, I mean, that's one of those bills that you just put your finger on and
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it's sufficient for myself. You know, I do always, whenever I have every 2 years, I'm always replacing my phone because I need the faster service and everything that, you know, better service, better phones, and it makes a difference. So I wouldn't think that moving to it would, I don't know, but it's sufficient.
Worthy discussion, and it sounds like Renee will look into best practices and how we can follow this. Quickly, we just signed a new lease because do you want to describe the
Sure.
agreement with the state of Utah and the use of the facility?
Yeah, this actually ties into a meeting we had earlier today a little bit, but so the county owns the courthouse, and there are the courtrooms are part of the county courthouse. So the courtrooms, the clerk's offices, and then the judge's chambers also, they're a section of the courthouse. But then the state actually leases those rooms back from the county for use of state courtrooms. However, the Grand County Justice courts fall within the jurisdiction of the county, so it's actually the county's responsibility to provide that courtroom, but the district court just lets us use, or the state just lets us use their courtroom that's fully equipped by the state. They let me use their chambers, and then my justice court's clerk's offices are actually not included in that lease because they're permanent. We know that they're part of that, but yeah. So there's a state lease to lease back, and then they just kindly share, and I think probably give some sort of in kind in that, I would suppose.
And that was just updated this year. So we actually only had budgeted 160,109 to receive this year. And that didn't reflect the amount that we actually received, which is reflective of the updated lease amount, $174,791. So I'm just displaying today for the record that updated revenue to be that we're expecting to receive in 2024 for that lease payment. One thing actually I just noticed, and I missed this, but it's something that maybe I'll want to communicate with you. We don't necessarily have to touch on it now, but I noticed that there's this justice court fines line in revenue. And so maybe that's something that we can talk, we can meet on, or you can give an idea of what we want to project there, unless you're ready to talk about it now.
I actually wanted to talk to you about that just to see where we're at for the year. So fines are state mandated, or fine amounts are set by the state. They're not state mandated. And then when I issue a judgment and issue a fine amount, generally follow the suggested fine amount with appropriate exceptions. However, I don't have a good way of projecting what those might be because it's all dependent on what law enforcement cites.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we've kind of trended without seeing those numbers for this year. I would guess that we're somewhere along the line of what last year was, perhaps down. Last I saw, down a couple percent for caseload, weighted caseload.
Okay.
So it might be about, if I were to guess, based on my weighted caseload, the number of cases I have had so far this year compared to last year, I would say we're about 5 to 10% less, but I don't know.
Okay. Looks like actual receipts reflect at 197, so we're 3/4 of the way through, so that would maybe put
Those would be delayed though, so what you're actually receiving are about 2 months behind what people are paying from what's ordered to their time they start paying.
Got it. So given that, we might be somewhere kind of close to the 2027, or somewhere between 270 and 300. So it looks like we'll be in the same ballpark, and we can talk a little bit more, and I'll kind of go through this particular revenue section at a future budget advisory board meeting. So this will get discussed again, and I will speak to our conversation with regards to what that projection could, is how it's best set.
Judge, can you remind me when you started in your position?
Started in January of 2020.
2020.
So right before COVID.
Commissioner Walker, do you have a question?
Yeah, could you go back to the previous screen?
Sorry, that was the previous revenue screen, yeah?
Yeah, just the one line.
Let's see, what was that? Miscellaneous, I think it was, yeah, okay. Yeah, this court lease, yep.
So that 174 you have under, shouldn't that be a negative number?
Thank you.
That's all, thanks.
I certainly should. All right. All right. Any other questions for the judge? Well, we sure appreciate you being here.
All right, thank you guys.
And yeah.
I'm gonna make sure we have all of our numbers plugged in.
I pressed I punched save in the software. Sometimes it doesn't save unless you really tell it to.
Yeah.
Few times.
That happened. Yeah, that happened to the cemetery last year. Can I interject before we get to the next department?
Please.
Unfortunately, the bylaws for the board state the vice chairperson shall be an elected official of the county, the designated budget officer, or a county employee. And so in light of that, I would make a nomination for Renee Baker to be the vice chair.
All right.
Thank you for that clarification. Kaufman, motion by Kaufman to make Baker the vice chair of the Budget Advisory Board, second by Bryant. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
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 That motion passes 5.
Best friends now.
All right, so did we have Andrea Noyes
I
online?
think I saw her walk in. Maybe she's
Okay.
on the phone.
So next up, for department presentations, bring up the agenda here. We've got Children's Justice Center, and the director of the center is Andrea Noyes. And here is the wonderful Andrea.
How are you? How are you?
Good, thanks. And so the budget for the Children's Justice Center is housed in Fund 45, so that's not in the general fund. And so I'm going to start with, we'll start with the revenue line
Thank you all
here
for
in
your
this
time.
department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judge. All right, and so this, in the revenue side of Fund 45, historically, we've looked at a number of grants that are used to support the Children's Justice Center operations. There have been some donation lines set in this side of the budget, as well as the county contribution, which is essentially, what the county puts in to pick up the slack and make the Children's Justice Center whole so that it's able to operate and offer its very critical services to this community. And so this year we have an increase in the grants. And do you want to talk a little bit about that grant and how that works, when you renew it and things of that nature?
Yeah, so our grant is through.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, Kevin.
Just at some point you want to change all those numbers in the blue column to negatives again.
Thank you. Will do. I'll do that while Andrew is talking. Thanks.
Our grant is through the fiscal year, so it starts July 01 and rolls all the way to June, the end of June of the following year. And those are state allocated funds through the Attorney General's office. They were able to secure more funding from the federal government this year, and that's why we see a little bit of a bump from the funds allocated last year to what we were receiving this year.
Great. And so you'll see that along with that increased grant funding, there's a coinciding decrease in the contribution from the county. And there is specifically in that state grant contract, there is a line that they designate local gov, and it's almost as though there was I think of it almost as a local match in a way, is a good way to understand that contribution from the county. I have here in the notes minus Vista and vehicle lease, because this 41,454, the state contract does specify county contributions for a Vista and a vehicle lease, but those aren't included in this contribution because the Children's Justice Center doesn't plan on making those expenditures.
Right.
Okay. Was there a Vista in the past at the
I believe that there was.
Okay.
Now that we say it, there was one in 21, I think. That's the only time I've known that.
Yeah.
This,
There hasn't been one in the last little bit.
And then in the past, there was a vehicle lease included to account for travel by the director to San Juan County,
Yes.
which is no longer needed anymore.
Right. They're still in discussion as far as the split goes. It was set to take place September 1st. And then actually, as of today, it looks like San Juan's extending that to the end of this year. So we'll still be covering both, but I shouldn't surpass most of the end of this year. So I don't think that's needed.
Okay. Thanks. And so as we go on these lines, it's important for the board and the public to recognize, and I included in the notes that the lines here for the 24 budget requests, I specify here which ones are specified in the grant contract to be fully funded by the grant itself, and where it's specified that there is a contribution from the county. So these lines where I put match, were in salary and benefits and utilities, and I thought there was one more, but that might be it as far as cash match. That's where the county contribution comes in, but everything else actually comes directly from the grant funding. It's not necessarily an expenditure. These aren't all expenditures necessarily out of the county coffers. So it's important to note that. Do you want to talk a little bit about the travel that you have planned this year? $23,700. It's a good amount of travel.
Yeah, so there are there are conference and training that's included with the state funds that were being allocated. One of them is to the NCAA leadership in Washington to represent our state at the national level. And then that also includes the symposium for all of our entire multidisciplinary team members to be able to attend that. And then also in-state travel. And that includes traveling up to meet with the AG's office and covering San Juan County.
Yeah. And anyone that's met or worked with Andrea knows that she has great leadership qualities. And so getting her out there traveling as a representative of Grand County and of Children's Justice Centers at large, I think is a really great thing. And I'm really happy that that's increasing in that way. And that didn't specify there, but that is, that's included in the grant as far as an expense goes. Let's see, there was one other line I think that's worth mentioning here, which is the in-kind for janitorial and building maintenance. And so that's not a cash contribution from the county. So the space cost line in the grant, was that 15 or 10? We put it in 10 here with 5,000 in kind.
It was a total of 10.
Total of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm wondering if the 5,000 is in kind, which means the county maintenance crew comes in and helps,
It is. So that includes that 5,000 donation as far as helping with the ground maintenance or to account for it.
So I'm wondering, I wonder actually if it, as an accrued expense, this should be set at 5,000 if 5,000 of it is in kind. Or if that do you have any insight on that idea?
I know that
I'm getting at?
The breakdown was 1,000 for janitorial and 4,000 for building maintenance. And then the 5,000 listed in kind historically in the past has always just been listed on that in kind. So I don't know if it needed to be counted in the budget or if it was just considered a donation.
Yeah. I'm gonna make a note on that one because I'm not 100% sure at this time if that should be set at 5,000 or 10,000 as far as an approved expense, or if it's considered that supplies needed to complete grounds and janitorial would still come out of this budget, but I'm not sure if anyone has any other ideas.
I mean, looking back, it doesn't look historically like we build a whole lot to that.
Right.
So I would think the in-kind would maybe come out of there.
Yeah. I'm going to set that at 5,000, Andrea, and then we can circle back and I'll update the board if it is. I think that looks, especially Renee makes a good point as far as the historical costs there, because and that being a little bit, I mean, it's still not necessarily that close, but we'll make sure to make that right and not leave you short there as needed. But it looks like that'll cover you as far as your needs.
Was the point of doing it the other way with the 10,000 so that we could document for grant purposes that, in addition to, actual funds, there's the equivalent of an additional $5,000? I think it's frequently the case in the budget that we have these sort of expenses that cancel each other out, but it's helpful to include an expense line and an income line just for audit purposes, basically.
Yeah. I guess I would agree with you if that was more in line with the historical, what was actually spent historically.
Okay, so you think the 5,000 is kind of an exaggeration for what was going on there?
That's my interpretation at this moment.
Okay.
Yeah, and then but that does bring up one thing that is worth noting. You'll see this budget isn't very complicated, but it's made even a little less complicated this year. In the sense of there are some lines that were approved in last year's budget that are kind of a further broken out version of what's being presented this year. Basically, I think for the purposes of Andrea as a new director and sort of aligning this budget, especially because it is so heavily grant funded, with the approved lines in the grant itself. I think that that's a more straightforward, streamlined way of doing it. A good example is supplies being at $98.50, and that's essentially because that includes supplies and food, which was previously broken out. And there's a couple other examples of that. Like notices had been in there, but got moved into communications, for example. So just wanted to, if anyone was wondering why the requests look a little bit different in 24 as compared to the past. We're aligning these lines with the structure of the grant itself. Conference and workshops. Do you want to talk about that 11,000 that you have budgeted for that item?
That's actually in the 23 total. So that's breaking that down. The conference and workshops is 11,700, and that includes the NCA leadership and the symposium.
Great. So that's in that 23,700, and we can zero it out here. Good catch. Right. Do any board members or anyone present have any questions for Director Noyes?
You did have listed in previous years a larger amount for call-out advocate, and there's a 0 to this year. Is that rolled into another one?
So we're in the middle of sorting out how the call-out advocates to be paid right now. So right now we put it under our professional and our contract services, which includes our translation services, and that's what we're looking to fund if we need to do a call-out advocate. And right now, as far as us covering one another, because I'm the only employee right now, there isn't another secondary employee that we do call out. We've been covering it with another professional from the attorney's office. And so we're grouping their pay under as like a joint responsibility.
Okay.
Thanks for that question, Mike. Are there any other questions regarding this department? Thanks so much.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah. All right, on to the next item in our agenda. We have item C of the presentations and discussion, Personnel Services Director Renee Baker, also a board member.
And vice chair now.
And vice chair.
While you get there, I will give an update on the salaries and benefits. So the process for getting those into the Casella Advantage system, there should be a way to upload those and then we can go in and edit them. You can even see that there's some numbers that I've gotten to populate under my budget, but when you actually click on those, there's no employees that are tied to them. So I do have a ticket in with Casella. I had put it in yesterday. I re-updated it today. So probably as we're sitting here, they're calling my phone to get that going. But I watched the video. It looks like they can just update that, and then we can go through and update that in the benefits. So by the next meeting, we should be able to see those amounts.
Great. By the next meeting. Awesome.
By the next meeting, we have
cool.
fingers crossed. Really hoping to have it before today, but.
All right, well, let's dive right in here.
Sure.
Looks like we have an added membership here for a new employee.
So I have, I'm pretty active in the Public Sector HR Association for the Utah chapter. And my newest employee, Laura, would like a membership with that as well for 2024. So that's $125 a year for the membership. That includes my membership, and then the additional $550 is our TechNet membership, which is where we can pull all of our compensation pay data. And we just like to stay as a member of that every year so that we can get up-to-date figures for proposing positions and things like that. So.
Thank you for breaking that out for us in a detailed manner.
Sure.
Always appreciate that. It looks like we have public notices, same level.
Yep, no change there. That's where we put all of our job advertising for job postings. we changed that in 21. I think I was putting it somewhere else and we moved it back up to that line.
Great. Travel's your request is up from, no, it's at this, it's
It's
the
at the same
I'm
level
sorry.
as 23.
Even
We're
though you
always
didn't get
hopeful.
around to it.
We never got around to it. I put my projection down to 400. But we do have some actual conferences planned, and I'll get to that when we get down to schooling, but.
Great. All right, we'll get to those details
Yeah.
as far as
That
which
would cover
actual
it.
ones, because as I stated before, we try to budget these things for not, oh, I'm thinking about some conference, I'm thinking about this conference is how we like to think about it when we're budgeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Increase to match average historical dollars as far as the office supplies and.
Sure,
expense,
I just-
carrying that over from.
Yeah, I bumped it up a little bit from 20, my original 23 request. I have gone kind of close to over the last couple of years, so I just did a average of the historical numbers there.
Thank you.
Sure, we can pull up that, break it down. I adjusted some numbers from when we talked, Gabe, because I remembered my express evaluations, and then I went back and looked at the Right Way contract. So let me describe some of those. Background and drug tests, I handle those for, out of my budget for those who are in the general fund. So I estimated the amount about 50. That might be kind of high, but hiring's been going pretty good. And then the unit price for those is about $50 a piece. Express Evals is our evaluation software. That's working out great. And that contract, or that amount, is the $5,500.
And that's evaluation software that can be used by department heads across the county to
Yep.
evaluate their employees.
Yep. And then Right Way is coupled with DexaBody, but they're our healthcare navigation app. I'd like to, and I even kind of wrote up a little bit deeper of a justification, but I'd like to keep them on for one more year and just really see if we are getting a true return on investment on their service. So they can help employees kind of structure their care plans if need be, find the right services, find the cheapest services within network, negotiate health bills, things like that. They can work with Cigna and get claims data from Cigna directly to help navigate healthcare with our employees. And so with that, our insurance plan, we are currently level funded. So once the plan can run well enough, we might see a surplus in a year or refund back. And actually in 2022, we ran well enough to receive back $196,000 surplus that we received in 23. So I do feel like Right Way is working. I think there can be some more utilization. So I'd like to give it one more year. That'll put us at 2.5 years with them. And then make a decision on if we want to keep them going or not. So.
Is that a year-to-year contract?
Yes, it is.
So that was just 35,000 being requested and carried over for the professional services line. There's a little bit of juggling happening in that cell phone allowance line.
Sure, I currently take the mid-tier, the $60. I'd like to decrease myself to the 40 in the next year and then add my 2 staff members, or we'll look into another structure and I might propose a different structure for that. But just trying to communicate with our employees a lot more receptive to text messages than anything else. So when we have to ask, where's your time card? That's usually where we start.
So this is 3 employees at the $40 a month allowance is what's being
Correct.
proposed.
Yep.
Okay, special department supplies is staying the same.
It is. I have it broken down in there, but we have this is our second year. We've done the summer barbecue at about $2,500 with prizes and all of that. We'd like to continue to cater the Christmas party and just put that in about the same amount. And then employee incentives / miscellaneous, that includes things like our years of service. We've been able to just every couple of months do a celebration desserts where we kind of honor birthdays, anniversaries, work anniversaries, and our new hires, and then just some additional incentive things like when we had the flood, I told Bill Jackson I'd pay for their crew lunch one day, so things like that.
Do you guys ever, I'm nice to have it match and be clean, but the cost of food for catering and stuff is just continuing to rise.
Sure,
Do we
sure.
need to have some inflation inflation?
No,
calculated
I
in
think
some
it's
way?
okay. I think, I've estimated it kind of high last year for this 23 year. Just because we also don't know how many people until it kind of gets a little bit closer are gonna be attending. So that 1282 is through the, summer barbecue. So I'm not even quite to the 25, so pretty good.
And so you're proposing, even though we're pretty well underspent, 7,500, still have to pay for the Christmas party. But are you just explaining that you're gonna make a more concerted effort next year to include more incentives and?
Sure,
and
yeah,
additional-
absolutely. And
So do you think the Christmas party's gonna put you over budget then?
I don't think so. I even adjusted my current year projection to the 5,000 in that line, since there is still a healthy amount. And we'll get to my inventory here in a second. That's looking a little rough, but, yeah, I think-
We'll get to it now, or sorry.
yeah, no, I think the 7,500 is a good amount to start and see if we get close there, so.
Okay, yeah, maybe if next year, especially now with like your new staff person, I'm assuming you'll be in a better position to kind of, follow through on achieve your goals in terms of incentives and appreciation and potentially, because it's an important element, I think.
Yeah.
Hugely.
But perhaps by this time next year, if you're not being able to get around to it, maybe at that point consider lowering this or
Sure.
adjusting it accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
24, I don't have any inventory requests, because this year we are getting to move office spaces. We've gotten to get some new furniture. And my new person, I don't know, when we added the new person in 23's budget, I don't think that inventory line got carried over to my actual inventory budget because I did budget for a desk and a computer for her. So all of our computers should be good through 24. And I don't expect anything other than maybe just a printer, but we've been pretty good about being somewhat paperless. So we're just kind of using the cheaper printers for running. We don't have to run a whole lot of paperwork.
Okay.
Currently.
So this overspend here is due to moving offices and
Moving offices,
having an employee this year as well. Great.
and then schooling I broke down as well, and I actually wrote down some actual conferences. But there's in 2022, I would really like to have offered, this year I would really like to offer a more leadership training countywide for our county leadership, and just haven't gotten there quite yet, but adding a staff person will achieve that goal in 24.
So that would be maybe like bringing someone in.
Bringing someone in, yeah, or doing something, let's call it like a leadership boot camp where we can kind of all get together a little more intensive than like our leadership meetings with that leadership focus. And then my department training at 3,000, I have, Laura would like to get a certification, which costs about $600 a test. Angie's hoping to get her certified payroll professional, which is about that $600 a test. And then I would like to start the classes for the compensation certified professional, which there's about 10 units within that handle a lot of how to do really deep dive on compensation analysis and pay structures. And so each unit is about $1,000. So I have one unit in there for 2023 or 2024. I'm sorry.
I'm just gonna notate real quick. As far as those department trainings go, you mentioned Angie,
Oh, sure.
yeah, what were those specific trainings? Compensation for professional,
There's a certified payroll professional.
sorry, I wasn't in the
No,
worksheet.
you're okay.
Certified payroll professional.
And then Laura would like to get an HR certification. So we're looking at either the SHRM or the more specific public sector one. And then the one that I would like to go for or start to go for is the certified compensation professional.
Thank you for providing that detail, and then also included in that 5,000 overall request is a wider county leadership training, which would fall under your department's expense. Great. Do any members of the board have any questions about the personnel services expense requests for 2024 or otherwise? Any other comments or questions?
I was just curious, Renee, how, now that you have gotten the additional staff member, how's that going for your workload?
I think it's been great. I think it's more me having to just shift and give her priorities to focus on, but she's really taking on the onboarding and cleaned up that processing for our employees. And then we're getting into our safety trainings and being able to offer more of those out. Luckily, the trust, our insurance company for liability and workers' compensation, has a robust kind of training program that's free to us, but it's just taken some staff time to get those out and organized. So it's been a wait, and it's just kind of more just shifting my own priorities to.
Still in process.
Yeah, we're still a little bit in process.
Yeah.
She started in the end of May, so
Right.
It's just been a couple of months.
Great.
Good, it was a long time coming.
Yeah, it really was. And now next week we'll have office space where we're all together. Pretty exciting.
And we're gonna be empty nesters.
I know you're gonna feel lost without us, Chris.
I always feel there's that bolt. Yeah, there's that bolt back there. I always feel like I'm bothering Angie. She always seems like she's so busy back in the office.
Yeah.
Treasures. All right. So thanks, Renee. We'll just gonna open up the agenda real quick. Nope. That one. All right. So we got Justice Court, Children's Justice Center, Personal Services out of the way, and last presentation and discussion is the Clerk Auditor's Department. That is me, Gabriel Wojtek, Clerk Auditor. And to clarify, oh yes, please save. To clarify, there is another department in the general fund that is named elections. So we're looking at 104142, which is my kind of office department. We also have here 104170, which is elections. And I just want to make clear at this time that we're not gonna go into the elections department. Not quite prepared yet for that piece, but I'm sure we'll have time at a future budget advisory board meeting to discuss expected costs. There will be 3 elections in 2024: presidential primary, regular primary, and the general election. And with that will come some costs, of course. And so on to the Clerk Auditor Department budget. Let's see, salary and benefits will be in there soon, as we know. Subscriptions and memberships and public notices, those are items I'm just carrying over. Baseline costs. And then we're travel expenses. I have it broken down here. I can speak specifically. There are 3 UAC conferences that I attend. There's the spring conference, there's the annual conference, and then there's a summer conference specifically for clerks. Myself and my chief deputy attend the summer conference, but usually I only budget for myself to attend the spring and general conferences. There's the Olene Walker Vote Certification training that is facilitated by the Lieutenant Governor's Office, and it's a really great comprehensive training specifically for election professionals. It's now statutorily required for chief staff and clerk auditors to complete that training, and with that requirement is also the cost associated with the registration is now covered. And I can't remember now if they're covering costs associated with with other expenses associated with going. I can't quite remember. I budgeted in here the costs associated with lodging for 2 staffs to go to 3 of those certifications in 2024, lodging, per diem, and gas. Cassell, which is our budgeting software that we're using right now, they started doing in-person trainings up in Provo. And I've been able to send staff this year to that training all day. It's just a full day training typically. So one night of lodging associated with it and gas, and that's been successful. And we're hoping that they continue to offer that in 2024. But I have included budgeted here to send 3 staff to that training. And then I have an extra $500 in here. We just contracted with a new election printer. They are based in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I am proposing an amount here to cover travel for me to visit that facility and review their practices. Part of the reason is that I have associates that I can travel relatively inexpensively. So not that it would be blending work and play. I don't mean to suggest that, but I can cover. The county won't have to cover lodging for me to go to St. Paul for a day and visit SeaChange, our new election printers. I think it would be a worthy thing to do as I try to get out ahead of the communication about our practices surrounding elections, and to be able to let the public know that at every step of the way, we have a lot of face-to-face communication with our software and equipment provider, ES&S, but historically not as much with our printer. And I'd like to be able to say that I've met our printers, I've seen their facility, and can vouch for their secure approach. So that's why that's in there. Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you. Don't you think that should go under the election part of the clerk auditor's office instead of here, or is there not a line item for that in the other one?
I don't think there is for training, because the Olene Walker certification always went in here too, which would conceivably go for elections.
And then I also just wanted to mention out loud that Cassell is not just the budgeting software, but it also is the core program used for all the employees in the office for cash receipting, accounts payable, and accounts receivable. So, and a lot of the grant tracking goes through there as well. So there's multiple, not just budgets.
And payroll.
And payroll.
And payroll does all the
Right.
things.
Okay.
Bank reconciliations.
Yes.
All right, so 4,500, moving on, 4,500 in office expense and supplies. That can vary from year to year, from, as you can see here, 3,500 to 4,900. 4,500 for the time being, just carrying that over to cover us as far as office expenses, supplies go. Next up is equipment maintenance, 32,500, and that accounts for the Cassell accounting software and the comprehensive, all the uses that it has, of course. Our property tax software, which is called Coins, as well as the Les Olson service contract, which includes maintenance service and copies, and that is that as well as sort of a carryover line to reflect past uses. 22, we had 32,000. We're a little bit off that pace, but just decided to carry that same that approved amount from 23 over to 24.
This is on equipment maintenance? Is that the line item we're on?
Yeah, and it's always been put in there. It's a little funny, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking that.
I put mine in professional and technical services, the Coins expense, but
and this is one of those interesting cases where like it makes more sense to stay consistent
Right.
With how it has been coded, so that we can look at the historical record of that line and sort of make sense of it. Even though, yeah, like as Treasurer Kaufman pointed out, the software fee would certainly make it would seem to be more consistent for that to go into, yeah, professional and technical or special department supplies, perhaps. I'm sure. What did you say that line in your budget? Do you
professional and technical.
Professional and
Yeah, I think
technical.
that's where I put the Coins expense.
Yeah. And so I could decide to change that and just, the problem was with our current budgeting software, it's really hard to maintain a note that would sort of indicate to someone in the future why those numbers fluctuated so wildly. It would likely become a mystery. So I tend to want to keep it the way it is. I mean, it wouldn't be a mystery. You could just look back at the ledger, of course, too. But yeah, that's just what we're doing this time, or that's what I'm proposing to do this time. Fuel line, keeping the same, from the 2023 request at 300. 30,500 is to pay for our consultant that prepares us for our annual audit. That's a firm, an accounting firm called Squire, and that's been a really fruitful collaboration, a really important, I think, resource that we've had, and especially now with recent turnover at the county, I think it's going to be it's going to be as important as it ever has to have that individual help us prepare for the audit and just get the books ready for that. HR expense has been at 0. Cell phone allowance, it sounds like that's something that we're gonna dig down into, but that's the allowance for myself and my chief deputy. Special department supplies, that is for expenses related to meals. It's gonna come in pretty crucial next year with 3 elections. Usually the day before election day and election day itself, my staff is all hands on deck, usually without breaks. And so lunch and dinner are provided on those sort of those big days. And sometimes, if the print vendor or the equipment and software provider for elections, or there's a visit from someone from the lieutenant governor's office, and there might be a lunch associated with it, and typically code to that special department supplies line. Capital outlay equipment, there's a new expense in there. My accounts payable clerk, Christy Backus, provided me a quote of $4,531 for a new mail machine. So in the clerk auditor's office, housed here in the county, we have basically the machine that meters and prepares mail that everyone across the county comes into our office and uses. So if you were to sit in my desk, you would see people flowing in and out starting in the morning and all throughout the day, folks getting mail out, and that's where the mail is also dropped off and collected. And our current machine is due for replacement. And it's a really critical basic piece of equipment. We do have 2 quotes. This is the other one is on a lease basis. This is I'm budgeting this amount in because that's the purchase price of the equipment itself, and it does include, and then there's an additional monthly cost for the metering. So I decided to put that number into the request, though it is a possibility that we pursue a lease option, which would be, at least in the near term, it would be lower cost to the county. I think one of the monthly lease payments I saw was close to 200 plus metering. So I think it would be like $250 a month. So obviously that comes in a little less than 4,500, but I decided to set that at that number in case that it was decided that it would be more advantageous to move forward with purchasing the machine outright. Inventory, IT gave no recommendation, or we're not scheduled to replace any computers associated with the clerk auditor's office, so we're 0 there. $4,000 is associated with the Master's Touch, which is the printer and also the e-notice provider for the tax valuation notices. So assessing and collecting has always gone into sending out that July tax valuation notice. 2022, that was up so high because we changed vendors, and there was unfortunately a little bit of doubling up of costs. And that was kind of unfortunate, but it was a worthy change when we did it, and hopefully we can incrementally lower this number to account for folks who are signing up for e-notices, which entails a lesser cost to the county. And in schooling, I'm going to open that up. I have 1 staff person that receives the county education reimbursement benefit of $5,250. They're pursuing and complete their 2 semesters left and pursuing an accounting degree. So that's really, that's applicable and beneficial to their duties with the county. And then here, sort of paralleled with that travel expense line, which accounts for per diem and travel and lodging expenses, are the costs themselves associated with the UX statewide conferences. And this is kind of, the 800 reflects usually the fall and yeah, I know it is too. The spring conference is usually around 200, I think, and then the general one is typically around 300, and then there's a cost associated with the summer clerk conference, which is ×2 in this case, 2 staff people. So I think what I just came up with actually is 700.
I think fall UAC is 450 this year.
Okay, I'll leave it at 800.
Just looked at it today.
Yeah.
I think it was, yeah.
Right.
Oh, and then so summer clerk. So I think that means I can actually delete this one though, based on the breakdown that I just gave y'all. Looks like I doubled this one up. Nope.
Mouse isn't working still.
Tap, tap, tap.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I can do it. I can do it. Okay.
Still did too.
See if I can do it there. No, that's not to change. I'm gonna try one more time. Thanks, people. Does the board accept that I will make that adjustment accordingly, given the,
Technical
She
issue.
doesn't like a one. You're just trying to delete it.
just trying to delete it. Maybe I could,
Type in
maybe I
a
could just zero, maybe I could just zero this, like enter 0 in here. No?
There we go.
Small victories.
Outside the box.
And then this, oh yeah, and I forgot, that's another thing where you have to manually save it. So yeah, there's a little bit more, there's some bigger items in here, a little bit more complexity. Does anyone have any questions about the clerk auditor department budget? Great. All right. Thank you all. So moving on. I wanted to talk real quick, have a brief discussion regarding BAB topics and scheduling. As it stands now, I have been able to schedule all the department presentations for every meeting. However, that's not the only thing that is discussed, of course, in the Budget Advisory Board. So I just wanted to open up that conversation a little bit, or let you all give the public and the board a heads up of some of the other things that we can expect to talk about at the Budget Advisory Board. One thing that's traditionally been done at the first meeting, so like this one, would be major fund revenue projections. And so that's, what I mean by that is taxes, so both, property taxes, but also sales and sales and use taxes, collections in the general fund associated with licenses and permits. We would put a wide range of grants in some of the other revenue lines, things like the State of Utah Justice Court lease that we discussed at today's meeting, charges for services, fines and forfeitures, so on and so forth. And so we'll have to do not only a review of all those revenue funds, but a projection for what we can expect in 2024, and perhaps a little discussion about where we're at in 23 and where we're coming in, because obviously that will inform what we're going to project in 24. And so since we're not discussing that today, and since the commission just approved our budget consultant, which the scope of work that I crafted for that individual has a lot of focus on working with me to draft these projections. I'm sort of trying to give a heads up, or I'm targeting. I'm targeting the September 21st Budget Advisory Board meeting to be able to look at those projections. I think that's realistic as compared to next week's meeting. as far as really getting on the same page with the consultants and giving them some time and giving them all the information that they need to be able to get some numbers together. So I just want to give everyone a heads up with that. The commission just approved district allocations, so that's in particular that's PILT and that's payment in lieu of taxes, and then there's mineral lease monies and there's the healthcare sales tax. And so there will be projections associated with that.
Gabe, before you go too much further,
Yeah.
did you get the email I sent to Chris Baird with the tax and interest and federal PILT projections that I made?
Yes,
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we all already have some numbers from the treasurer with regards to that. I wanted to just put TRT in here, of course. It's going to be a topic that's going to be relevant to some of the departments that we look at that are heavily funded by TRT. And also this year we have some, due to legislation, we have some updates on the qualified uses, and which were reflected in the mid-year budget amendment. But I figured it's likely that it's going to warrant some further conversation as it relates to how it's funding certain departments and other county activities. And I left that pretty vague. Ultimately, the commission is going to have it's going to start some workshops. I saw last year the commission didn't really dig down into budget workshops until actually November. And I'm not sure if we're going to follow that pattern. I tend to think that we might try to initiate that in October, maybe a little earlier this time, but maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I think that my consultants as well that I'll be working with, hopefully we'll have a recommendation as to that sort of timeline. And then there will be, because we a lot of the revenues, the sales and use taxes that we receive, we usually see what those come in at towards the end of the month. Like usually it's like the 22nd or the 23rd. And so I put updated revenue projections because, there's going to be this revenue projection conversation the 21st of September. But by the time of the last budget advisory board meeting on October, is it 26th or 28th? I can't remember. We're going to have 2 more months on the books of sales and use revenues. And so there will be a chance to tweak or update the conversation that's had on the 21st. Also, typically towards the end of the budget advisory board meeting, right now I don't have department reports scheduled for the 26th of October, which is the last Thursday of October, and historically that's when the budget advisory board, along with the sort of recommendation of forwarding the tentative budget, has discussed things like employee position requests, capital equipment, capital buildings, a potential cost of living adjustment as part of this general tentative budget overview. So those things will be reviewed by the budget advisory board, and forwarded to the commission for their own discussion and debate. So does anyone have does that sound comfortable? Does that sound like it's covering bases? Does anyone have any input on that at the moment? And this is iterative and there's always I'm always available for feedback, either by email or at a future meeting, at the public meeting. We can discuss topics that should be discussed for sure. But I wanted to present these as sort of an overview of things that in budget advisory boards in the past have always covered, and that we will work into those agendas and create a plan for.
Yeah, in reading over the minutes from our, the final meeting from last year, we sort of came to the approving of the tentative budget with the recommendation that the commission not overspend the bottom line by more than $800,000, which was sort of our estimate of what we probably wouldn't spend. So recommended they do a balanced budget and then factor in, we gave them a few different ideas of ways that they could trim or change the budget to achieve that. And I always think that that's a good place for us to end. That's kind of our end work product is we've gone through the line items of all the departments. Here's the tentative budget. Here's sort of these bigger outstanding checks and decisions that in my opinion fall more at the commission level than they do at the advisory board level. And I think that's a good goal to shoot for.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And then I just put in here as one last little item for discussion regarding potential amendments to BAB bylaws. And did I get it in here on my jump drive, which is the actual
He's trying to get you
ordinance?
back.
On the-
He's trying to-
No, it's
Yeah,
gonna be like,
he's trying to
Shane
reach
has to
out.
be vice chair.
And so thankfully Chris came to the rescue to talk about this, what these actually read and to make sure that we're compliant with our own ordinance here. But there's this question of composition and the 7 people that are authorized to be part of the board. And in particular, there's this item: the balance of the board shall be comprised of the designated Grand County budget officer, if not one of the persons listed above. At this point in time, I am the designated Grand County budget officer, and I'm also one of the people above. So then we would go to B. Any other registered Grand County voter with demonstrated interest in or professional knowledge of budgeting, let's see, hold on. If not one of, and any other. So Shaylee is this any other registered Grand County voter with demonstrated interest in. But then further down in the ordinance, it speaks to that composition piece, if it's not one of the person.
Well, it says the balance of the board, and so right now we have one other slot to be filled by that last bullet point.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And so in sort of like briefly discussing that, we came to the conclusion that, with the commission's blessing, the commission should be able to appoint, someone to fill that role on a pretty wide-ranging basis. And we don't necessarily have to amend the bylaws for this budget season to specify someone, say, from the commission administration office, or say an additional person from the public.
I actually somewhat disagree. I think if we go with that bullet and the commission doesn't want to change it, it has to be advertised.
Okay.
And so I assume a county employee could apply, but I do think it would have to be advertised for a public position that the commission would appoint.
Well, there's a section,
Change.
there's a section 4 that allows for filling of vacancies.
That's what I wanted to.
So my reading of that was that because the regular course of events is that at the beginning of the year, the commission does that, and they have accepted applications in the past, but where we have a vacancy, we have a clause here that allows them to fill that, to fill in the rest of the term. And whether or not we have to have, hearings or advertisement for that, it doesn't say.
We do normally post those.
Even for vacancies.
Well, it depends on the vacancy that would be filled.
Yeah.
And that's why I would recommend changing the bylaws, so that it could be, I think we talked about actually the commission administrator or designee. If the commission did that, I'd say Quinn, but I don't know that there's enough vagueness that, what?
I do feel like there's like a pretty firm amount of transparency by us going through the process correctly of like advertising it and trying to find another board member rather than just being appointed as another county employee. It just feeling like from the one citizen here that's not county specific, I would say that feels like a good like transparency step of like, oh, look, we advertised it, we did our due diligence, and we have 2 citizens that are not directly paid or tied to the county. That would be my thought.
I agree. Oh, sorry, go
First
ahead.
section would look good.
Yeah,
I
I mean, overall public perception would look, I don't even see a huge outcry to be on the board.
agree. I was just thinking, I'm probably
Well,
gonna
I
need to
don't-
serve a second
That's what-
second
but I-
term.
My suggestion right now, however, because I agree with that piece, but like right now is like we're in it and we've already had the first meeting
Mhm.
now. So it almost seems like it could seem a little backwards to say, hey, come and join this board. We've already started. Don't worry. Like, I think I like the idea of being in the position to post it ahead of time to any member of the public for next season. But I'm more concerned right now because this is, we're so,
So
you
do
know,
we,
we're
so
so
like in
far
the
into it.
vacancy that says, maybe we change that if a vacancy occurs, like in the middle of budgeting season, that then it can be appointed by a commission as a county employee. But I think that should be like one of our tasks is advertising and then interviewing during the season.
Mhm.
So I agree, like you can't always control that and it would suck to come into this board mid-budget.
You'd be coming in blind and it
Yeah.
would be impossible to be
You're not
impossible
catching
to
it,
be a
yeah.
contributor.
Well, we have time to get it on the next commission agenda, so it may or may not be resolved by the next budget advisory board, but I can talk more with administration about this. Basically my idea is that it would be, I would recommend sort of getting Quinn on board because he has a familiarity with this process. And serving as a clerk auditor previously and being involved in this process for this current season. But also leaving open that possibility for a second citizen seat and really doing posting that and making that public and transparent in a way that feels like it's actually welcoming and actually like really wanting that involvement.
I agree.
Yeah.
I did.
Cool. And I wanted to thank Mike for coming in and sitting in for Bill.
Thanks for having me.
Bill was a really good sport. He volunteered for this assignment, and Thursday is his like biggest meeting day as a commissioner. But he's making the adjustments and sacrifices necessary to the other boards and obligations that he has to make sure that he's present and participating I think at most of the rest of these meetings. And I appreciate his understanding as I had to make a decision to sort of pick this slot due to chamber availability and the general desire to have it on Thursday and not Friday.
I'm so happy. Like, wait.
Thursday's always better.
It's Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
I don't care what board you're on.
But Mike, we'd love to have you at any of these if you're available.
No problem.
It's kind of fun, isn't it?
It is definitely interesting
It was
seeing
rough
where,
last year. It was like, geez,
where funding comes from or how we allocate, et cetera.
it's actually really interesting. I
And to
told a
see
lot
where
people
some of
that
my
it's a cool board to be
decisions
on.
fall.
Well, it's an education standpoint that like I can now say, oh, when people are like, well, our taxes are getting used for that. You're like, actually, it's
Yeah.
not. Let me tell you about the grants that are happening. And
Yeah, and as far as like for future BAV topics and scheduling, this could be a good opportunity to bounce off ideas or provide recommendations to the budget consultants that we just contracted with in terms of how they're going to present the budget to the public and that whole process. And there might be some valuable recommendations that
will
could
they
come from
be
this.
in some of our meetings?
Yeah, I think I'm going to propose that they be present at least via Zoom for the rest of the BAB meetings. This particular meeting was purposely designed to be pretty light. So, yeah, but hopefully we're gonna wrap them up mostly by 4.
Well, thanks for everything you guys do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being involved. I will go ahead and, any other future considerations?
Just one thing I think to note is that the bylaws are a separate document from the ordinance. Even though there's a whole lot of overlap, like they say a lot of the same stuff, they are different. And we can change the bylaws by vote of the BAB, although we can't, they're not gonna supersede what the ordinance says, so we can't change some of the structural issues that are coming up without having a budget officer anymore. But just to point that out, if there are things that we want to tweak in the bylaws, we can do that. But things that are in the ordinance are gonna obviously have to go through the commission.
Thank you so much for pointing that out. Great. All right, it's 3:41. I'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Nice.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah, me too.
It's like the middle of my week. It's like Tuesday.
It feels that way. It's been, but I've also like had enough work this week. It's probably 3 weeks now since Tuesday.
They did.
Yeah, keep up your.
I've just been so.
Thank you, guys.
Been able to do the contract stuff with him.
When we get around to changing the ordinance, we should maybe consider striking the audit functions of the budget committee, because they've never been done. Sorry about that.
Audit functions.
Yeah. After the first year in which the board is formed, review the internal control environment of at least 2 county departments. Yeah, anyway,
Yeah, because we have the internal audit committee that
and I think,
tends to fill that role.
I think that was created after the
Yeah, I
fact.
think.
Oh, I think you're right. It was like, but close to the same time.
Yeah, 2018, in that area.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
Interesting.
just so that there's not things